Welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by thesoberclub.com. I'm Janey Grace. This is for you if you've quit the booze or you'd like to, or maybe you're just sober curious. I'll bring you tips and motivation without any judgment, and there'll be inspiration from experts, quit-lit authors, and sober heroes. Hi and welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for the messages that I got after last week's podcast. It's really nice of you to drop me a message, particularly when I've done something a little bit different and just shared some thoughts with you. It's really good to get your feedback. And I have a very big ask this week. I would love it if you would be willing to vote for this podcast, if you've been listening to it for a while, or even if you've just come across it in the British Podcast Awards. And all you have to do is go to a link. I'll put it in the show notes, but also I can just tell you it's really simple. It's British Podcast Awards /voting, British Podcast Awards /voting. And that takes you to the listener choice. And then you have to type in the name of the podcast, which is Alcohol Free Life, as you know, hopefully, and then give it a vote. I'd so appreciate it. But the bit that sometimes gets missed is that they then send you an email that you have to click on before your vote is registered. So if you are willing to do that for me, I would so appreciate it. Most of you know this is a bit of a labour of love for me. I'm not paid to do this. It costs quite a lot of money to do it. I love doing it, and I'll always do it as long as I've got fantastic guests, which I'm really lucky to get amazing guests. But it would be amazing to have some recognition for it. So yeah, if you're willing to give me a little vote, I'd so appreciate that. British Podcast Awards /voting, and make sure you click on the email once you've voted for Alcohol Free Life podcast. That's my big ask out of the way. Although I do have a Substack as well. So some of you are aware of the fabulous writing platform that is Substack. It's really a wonderful place for writers to dive a bit deeper into some of the stuff that they care about. So, I've been writing blogs and articles for ever and a day, but Substack is an opportunity to delve into things in a slightly more in-depth way. So if you want to search out my Substack, please do. And come on board as a subscriber there. There's a few different options, and as it progresses, there'll be more opportunities there to get involved. And while I'm on the asking for help staff, if you want to support this work as well, you can also buy me a coffee. Buymeacoffee.com /Janey Grace. I think that's it. You know full well that I would far rather meet you for a coffee. So if that's possible, then come on down. Let's meet for a coffee. I got to meet a podcast listener last week, which was just great. It's just really lovely to be able to catch up with people and find out where they're at. Very much looking forward to our event on the 2nd of July. I don't know if there's still any tickets left, but go to thesoberclub.com, click on events, and if there is, then grab yourself a ticket there for July the 2nd, when my special guest is Claire Pooley. I mean, that's just so exciting. I also realised that it's coming up to the 300th episode of this podcast. How crazy is that? Absolutely crazy. And I found out the other day that most podcasts don't get beyond episode 20, something like that. So clearly I've got a lot to say, and an amazing guest, which leads me beautifully into letting you know about this week's guest. So Dr. David Hamilton is a friend of mine. I've known him for a lot of years. We were both Hay House authors. He still is, of course. His books are just absolutely, they're life-changing. They really are. When I first read Why Kindness is Good for You, it just opened up a whole new world for me of thinking differently. He really is an amazing author. I love the work he does around how your mind can heal your body, and his books around self-love, and he's just got some really fantastic, very realistic way of looking at everything. If you get a chance to hear David speak as well, he's wonderful. Definitely going to do an event with him at some point. So I miss those days when we used to do Hay House events together. So David is just such a special, amazing person. So I really hope you enjoy the interview with David, all about his new book. For those of you who are Sober Club members, we did an exclusive Q&A with David as well. So even if you weren't able to attend that, then that will be available for Sober Club members. Don't forget, if you did want to join us in the Sober Club, it is, this is not an ask for help or a sell. It's just to let you know, in case you're not already aware of it, that there's just so much support there and inspiration and so much good stuff, whatever stage you're at, whether you're day one, sober curious, been doing this for a few weeks, been doing it for months, years, it really doesn't matter, because it's so much about what happens next and creating that life that you don't have to escape from. And on a regular basis, we just get so much wonderful stuff and wonderful feedback in our community. Just the wonderful things that people are doing, just the way they're loving life, and that lovely sense of having been given a second chance at life. I think that's one of the loveliest messages that someone said to me, who I worked with when I was doing some one-to-one coaching. She said, I really feel like I've got a second chance at life. And that's absolutely how I feel. I really do. I'm sure lots of you have heard me talk about how I was so scared of getting old and so scared of everything going south, in every way. But actually, I don't feel like that way at all now. I mean, for starters, ditching the booze is the best anti-aging hack ever. So that's handy. But, whether it is or it isn't, you get to live your life to the fullest and enjoy every moment. What's not to like? So if you're new to all of this, then do go back, listen through to some podcasts, because there's so much choice, so much to listen to. Do check out some of the blog posts. Have a look at the Substack, and start to get inspired, because that's what this is really. It's about sort of catching sight of that, just how much better life is without the booze. And it's been lovely this week as well, because I've been chatting to people who are potentially interested in joining my Sober Coach training program. And it's just been lovely to hear so many different ways of that people are kind of utilizing their sobriety, if you like. People who are just really picking up on all different ways of supporting other people. So it's very exciting. And one of the things that we all agree on is that the more people we have out there in the world sharing this positive message of sobriety, how fantastic is that? The more people who are talking about the fact that we do not have to wait till we're rock bottom. If the only question you're Googling is, am I drinking too much? That's not the right question. You may well be, by the way, but that's not the right question. The right question is, could my life be better without the alcohol? And, if you've even ever asked that question, then I can assure you the answer is yes. It really can, because whose life isn't? I don't know anyone who liked themselves better when they were drinking. Do you? I really don't. I mean, I know of some people who are still locked into that mentality that perhaps life was better with the booze. Can't understand that for one moment. I can only think I haven't kind of stepped into the full personal growth piece. I haven't stepped into the whole, acknowledging that, you have to do a little bit of work at the beginning, but man alive, life is better afterwards. So anyways, without further ado, here we go. Well, I'm just so thrilled to be able to chat to David Hamilton. David, goodness knows how long ago we met. Scary long time, right?
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, at a Hay House conference. My goodness, amazing. Yeah. Anyways, welcome. I don't think there are going to be many people who are not aware of your work, but, just in case, everyone sort of gets into this stuff at different stages, don't they? So just in case anyone isn't aware of what you do you want to take us right back and let's just hear a little bit about how you got into all of the stuff that you do now?
Yeah. So I started my professional career working in cardiovascular and cancer research and development. So I have a PhD in organic chemistry, which is nothing to do with organic food, unfortunately. It's the science of an organic chemist is like an adult who plays with Lego blocks, but instead of using plastic building blocks, we use atomic building blocks, but the principle is the same. So like a child's green block is my carbon. Their yellow block is my nitrogen, their red block is my hydrogen. But the idea is the same. Instead of assembling, cars and rocket ships and buildings out of Lego blocks, we assemble medicines out of atomic building blocks. But the idea is more or less the same. And so I specialized in cardiovascular medicine and cancer, but I became intrigued by the placebo effect. it was probably a bit of scientific curiosity where I was fascinated with trying to understand why it was that people who got placebos made some form of improvement. And it wasn't just a figment of your imagination, as many of my colleagues at the time assumed that it's all in the mind, but it wasn't all in the mind at all. What actually happens is your belief or your expectation actually cause real chemical changes in the brain, which then impact your body on a physical level. And so I began to study that, and it kind of fueled me, because I think deep in my heart, I always wanted to teach and to write, to communicate. That was always my thing, despite the fact that I'd done a PhD and went down the conventional route. To be honest, I almost went into academia because my desire to teach was so strong that I almost became a chemistry professor, but just decided really at the last minute to apply for a research and development position. And so, but that passion to educate and to teach hadn't ever left me. And it was when I began to understand the placebo effect, I thought, I really want to teach about the mind-body connection and how different states of feeling, even like the feelings associated with compassion and kindness, how all of these things can have a beneficial effect on the body. So after about 4 years, I decided, I'm just going to make the leap now and start writing. So I just decided to leave one day and started writing my first book a couple of years later.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm guessing, just as a little aside, I'm guessing the medical profession haven't actually caught up. And you are sadly probably the only person.
I think there's a greater understanding now. There definitely is a greater understanding and appreciation of the mind-body connection, more than there ever was, actually. But I think we've still a long way to go. But there's definitely positive shifts. Like I know a lot of doctors, for example, a lot of younger GPs who are very, very knowledgeable about the mind-body connection, but that wouldn't have been the case maybe 20 years ago.
Well, that's good to hear. I think it's fair to say that, in recent years, you've become the king of kindness, and you really have made... Well, you've done it from a scientific perspective, I suppose. And I think that's what's unique about the stuff that you do. Because of that background, you're not willing to just kind of pop a book out that just goes, oh, do this, try that. You've really sort of really got involved in the science of it all. Yeah. So, obviously we could talk forever because you've had so many amazing books out. I mean, just to give a nod to how your mind can heal your body. Have I got that title exactly right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, I loved that book. It's so powerful, just exactly on what we've just been talking about. So, hats off to you for that incredible book. I loved Why Woo Woo Works. Amazing, amazing book. That was just so fantastic to be able to kind of all the naysayers who are like, oh, come on, we can go, well, Dr. David Hamilton has come at this from a scientific perspective. So it's not just fluff. But of course, we do think of you as I say, as the king of kindness. So tell us tell us the striking, fabulous title for the new book coming up.
It's here. It's called The Joy of Actually Giving a Fuck.
Excellent. And the strapline, how kindness can reduce stress and make you happy, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Fantastic. So let's go right back then to the whole concept of you being the king of kindness. For anyone who's not aware of this concept, why is kindness good for us? What exactly is it? Because we all know what it means to be kind, but where does the science come in?
Yeah, well, could I just qualify first of all? I know everyone says king of kindness, but what I would like to add to that is maybe in brackets, king of writing about.
Okay, kindness. Yeah. You're not actually kind at all, right?
No, it's because I feel completely humbled when I hear about the stories of people who are out there in the front line being kind, every day, and it's just humbling. Like I'm the honorary scientific advisor for a charity, 52 Lives, and the outpouring of public kindness that people do to help a different person every week is just really, really humbling. So because of that, I think I would prefer kind of writing about
writing about kind. We'll take that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, kindness is physiologically and neurologically actually the opposite of stress. And that's one of the real cornerstone teachings. And when I say, I know people might think, well, stress is a feeling or it's a state and kindness is a thing that you do. So how could they be opposite? Well, let me rephrase it. The opposite of the experience of stress is the experience of kindness, right? So what stress is like for you, the opposite conditions inside the body that get generated from what stress is like for you is the conditions generated by what kindness is like for you. Hence, when people talk about if you feel stressed, you generate stress hormones. And these are, to scientists, these are biological products of the experience of stress. So similarly, when you have an experience of kindness, whether you're the giver of kindness or the receiver of the kindness, or even if you're the witness to the kindness, there's also biological products of that experience. So I call them kindness hormones, really just to draw that parallel. But what's fascinating is they bring about almost opposite conditions inside the brain and body in a number of different ways. So, for example, one of the things they do is they actually dial down the intensity of one of the key stress regions of the brain. They also reduce blood pressure in the opposite way from the way, stress increases blood pressure. And that's a real physiological thing. For example, kindness hormones, the main one in this respect is oxytocin. And I know most people associate that as a reproductive hormone, but that's only one of its roles. It's actually a very important cardiovascular hormone. That's the bit that most people don't know about. And what it does is it parks in the lining of our blood vessels, and it causes a wee reaction that really reduces the tension on the walls of the blood vessels. And that expands them, which means the heart doesn't have to push as hard to get blood through. So the heart eases off its pressure. What you get out of that is a reduction in blood pressure. So kindness hormones are actually cardioprotective hormones. And what that means is kindness is cardioprotective, i.e. it's protective towards your heart and your cardiovascular system. One of the ways it does that is by keeping blood pressure in check. So kindness isn't just a thing that you do or a feeling state. It's actually a measurable physical impact in the brain and in multiple places throughout the body.
It is amazing. And I love the fact that you talk about, obviously we can kind of imagine that the receiver of the kindness is going to have all those lovely, warm, fuzzy feelings, of course. Yeah. But in fact, the giver of the kindness, we know now that in fact, isn't it that there's just as much benefit or even more? It's not just an altruistic act at all.
Yeah. There's just as much. In fact, in some ways more, because giving kindness also supports mental health. I mean, in fact, giving kindness in that experience consistently actually leads to real physical changes in the brain, in some of our brain networks that make states like happiness and joy and positive mood, make them more accessible to us in the longer term. So it's like if you go to the gym and you tone up a muscle and the muscle becomes firmer, larger and more powerful. So similarly, if you tone up a brain region, in other words, like, for example, if you do mindfulness, mindfulness is like taking this frontal part of the brain to the gym. You give it a workout and it undergoes something similar to muscle growth, but they call it neuroplasticity. But the idea is more or less the same. That part of the brain above the eyes becomes firmer, larger and more powerful. It means that everything you use that part of the brain for becomes easier. So similarly, if you practice what I call kindfulness, which is any type of mindfulness-based practice where at least some of the focus is on building a sentiment of kindness and compassion, which might even be just thinking of people you care about in your life and imagining how great it would be if they had some good fortune in their life, or just saying a couple of positive phrases in that way. What we actually do now is we work out the frontal part of the brain, but with a slight bias to the left-hand side and a little bit deeper in. These are key regions of the brain that play that crucial role in the experience of happiness and joy, which makes those states more accessible to us. It doesn't mean if you be kind, you'll be happy all the time, because life happens. But it means because that muscle, in effect, is more powerful, it means those states are more accessible to you in the long run. And that's one of the scientific reasons why nearly every single scientific study in the field shows that being kind makes us happier. It's not just a spiritual thing. It's not just a satisfying thing. It's an actual physiological thing that makes happiness and joy more accessible to us.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that it can be, as you say, it can even just be thinking positive, kind thoughts. I love that. I love the fact that, because I think sometimes we can get a little caught up and think, oh, okay, well, that's all very well, but I don't have the money to go and do a random act of kindness and pay for someone else to go somewhere. But it can be something tiny. And I'm sure I shared with you once before that many years ago, when my mum used to suffer from mental illness, and when she was going through a really bad patch where she was so depressed she couldn't do anything, she couldn't physically do anything, and I felt completely at a loss as to how to help her in any way. I didn't live anywhere near her, but I remember just saying to her, is there anybody, do you have any neighbours, near to you? And she said, oh, well, only whatever his name, who lived in the same building. But he can't get out. He's in a wheelchair. He can't get out. So I just said to her, well, does he read the paper? And she said, well, he used to when he could get out. So I said, okay, well, why don't you just go get it for him? And something must have sparked something in her. And then the next time I spoke to her, she said she'd been and bought a newspaper and taken it to the neighbour. Oh my God, it changed everything. That tiny little thing, which we should have done it anyway, right? She probably read it herself first and then took it to a neighbour. It's the tiniest thing, but it lifted her out of that funk, right? Yeah. So it can be something very small, can't it? And I think that's the piece that we all need to really catch hold of. It can be as small as a thought, or it can be something big, or it can be tell us what we mean when people use the phrase random acts of kindness.
Yeah, I'm glad you used that example, Janey, because I think a lot of people make the assumption that kindness, for it to have an effect, it has to be something visible and large and, something seemingly significant. But everything matters, even the tiny little small things. While you were saying that, I was remembering something that happened last year. I was simply walking down to the co-op, and I was about to turn round into the co-op, and there was an elderly gentleman lying on the ground. And immediately, and the thing is, at the time, I was going through a pile of stuff. My dad was very unwell at the time, and he later passed away with a brain tumour. But all that stuff was in my head, and I was really kind of struggling. And it snapped me out of myself, seeing this elderly gentleman on the pavement, and I helped him to get up. I said, are you okay? And it turned out that he tripped at the top of a flight of stairs that lead up onto the high street, or up onto one of the main streets. And he just tripped at the top and fallen over. And I just happened to be there at the moment, and I helped him to get up. And he dusted himself down. He said, I'm absolutely fine. And he walked away into the co-op himself. And it just took me out of myself. And I think sometimes these seemingly random things that you do that you don't really plan, it just, we all stumble upon opportunities to help other people, whether it's something seemingly small or something, seemingly more significant. But what they do is they take you out of your own head and they put your attention onto the immediate needs of another person. And it's that is one of the reasons why it can be like an antidote to stress in the long term. As you start getting used to that kind of sense and that kind of feeling, like of stepping out of yourself and what it's like then, because you suddenly realise I've just helped someone else. And sometimes it puts some of our own problems into perspective, I think, a little bit for us. But a random act of kindness really is just random in the sense that it's not really planned. It's just something that you do, that you come across, an idea that you might have, or someone you hear about or know about who needs a bit of help, and you just, whatever it is, even a small thing like buying a newspaper, it's a great example.
In the book you talk about kind leadership, and I'm really interested in this because over the years I've come across people who their workplace stress is off the scale. In fact, I co-wrote a book around stress, techniques for stress for different professions. And as part of that research, we had to do research into a couple of different professions and what was going on in the workplace. It was done completely anonymously. Teachers, for example, oh my goodness, I just was not prepared for the stuff that came back as to the level of stress that some teachers are under. Similarly, nurses, we did a book called Stress to Calm for Nurses. I was a bit shocked that these were all anonymous responses. But I suppose what it sort of showed me is that so often there just is not enough effective leadership in place, right? Yeah. That really is what it boils down to, because no one can get everything right. No one, life is never perfect. But what are the qualities of a kind leader, and how can we encourage kinder leadership?
Yeah, there's so many different ways of being a kind leader. In a sense, it starts with being conscious of the importance of kindness and why it matters when you're in a leadership position. It starts with being conscious of kindness and why it actually matters. The fact that, show people respect, for example, trusting people, cutting people a wee bit of slack, get rid of the notion that people have to get everything right all the time. Give people a wee bit of breathing space. We all make mistakes. It depends on the profession, of course, but we all make little mistakes. And if you take the pressure off having to get everything totally right all the time, then you find that people will start to flourish. People will start to be the best version of themselves. And also, if they know that you're not going to be unkind to them, that you're going to support them through things. So that's one of the ways we can show kind leadership. I can give you another example that I often use when I'm speaking at leadership events. My dad told me a story a couple of years ago, shortly after he'd retired, that it was just a few years before he'd retired. He was working his job. He retired at 70 years old, and his job was as what you call a concrete finisher. So he was one of the people that lay and level the floors of supermarkets and great big shopping centres, the proper concrete floor. My dad used to lay and level those. That's what his job was. And one day they were laying the floor of a large supermarket in a town in Scotland, and a pipe got ruptured outside. There was workers doing work outside the supermarket, maybe laying some pipe or something, and a water main got burst, and there was water pouring furiously all out of all out of the pipe, and it was all over, flooding the car park, and everyone was panicking because very shortly it was going to spill onto the road, and that would have shut the whole town centre, and it would have cost a fortune, and people were kind of panicking. My dad, quick thinking, climbed down into the hole. He was soaking wet. He got a crowbar and he managed to kind of semi-close the pipe a little bit so that it wasn't furiously spewing out as much. And then he diverted some of the concrete that he was going to be using to lay the floor. He diverted it some of it on top of the pipe, and it basically just sealed the outpouring of water. Then my dad just shook it off, soaking wet, went back to work and finished the rest of the shift. So the next day, the CEO of the company showed up on the site. He'd driven 50 miles from Edinburgh to where my dad was working, and he asked for directions for my dad, and he went over and he said, "Excuse me, are you Robert Hamilton?" My dad said, "Yeah." He said, I'm the CEO, Mr. Such and Such, and I just wanted to shake your hand and say thank you for the amazing job that you did yesterday, because you saved us a lot of money. You saved, everyone was panicking. You were level-headed. I just want to come and say thanks." And my dad was, "Oh, it's fine." He says, "No, it isn't fine. I just wanted you to understand that you did something really significant, and I wanted to come and personally say thanks to you." And then he asked my dad about his family and how long he'd been working here. And I remember he said, he's married, he's got 3 daughters. He says, "My son's a doctor." He would always say, "My son's a doctor." He was always proud of that. And I used to step in and qualify that I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a PhD. But my dad,
Doctor of Divinity, David.
So my dad just used to love saying that. And anyway, for years afterwards, my dad would talk about how the head guy came all the way over to see him. And that was just so meaningful and significant for my dad, because my dad, being a blue-collar worker, more of the time had been treated actually disrespectfully. Yeah. Not all of the time, but by more senior people, the way my dad and other blue-collar workers was spoken to often was quite disrespectful, in the sense that you just that was normalised. You were just used to it. And this was such a contrast, and it had such an impact on my dad. And it made me think of when I talk to leaders about being a kind leader. If you imagine the impact your words or your actions can have on someone else, that made my dad enjoy his work for the last couple of years that he worked before he retired. He enjoyed his job more.
So you're going to get much more effective workers as well, aren't you, if you're kind? Yeah.
A lot of it just comes down to how you treat people, and that starts with being conscious of kindness as a kind leader. And every day asking yourself the question, can I do this kindly?
Yeah,
can I
absolutely.
communicate this kindly? Can I do whatever I'm doing right now? Can I do it in a kind way? Is the way I'm about to do it kind? Is there a kinder way to do it that respects people, that shows trust people, that helps people to feel that they're valued and that they're proud to be here and they feel like they can flourish in this job without someone, being really mean to them?
Well, on that note, what about how do we deal with unkindness from others? Because we want to be able to maintain our kindness, even when faced with unkind behaviour. But then we need boundaries, don't we? So how do we kind of balance the kindness and the justice, as it were?
Yeah. Well, it sort of depends, because if someone's not being kind to you, the first thing I try to do, and this is, it's not always easy. I'll put my hand up right away and say that it's not always easy. But one of the things I try to do first, if someone's not being kind, is I imagine maybe that person's having a bad day.
Yeah.
Because you never know what people are going through.
No, exactly. It's the walk a mile in their shoes.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
In fact, I'll share another experience with my dad. I talked about my dad a wee bit in the book because he passed away not so long before I started writing it. And I feel that his spirit really was a big reason why I changed the title of the book. The original title of my book was The Art of Kindfulness, and I changed it to The Joy of Actually Giving a Fuck. It seemed the right thing. But when my dad was unwell, and this is where I really got that understanding properly of you never know what people are going through. I used to drive him to his radiotherapy appointments. Not all the time, but sometimes my sisters or brother-in-law would help out. But I did it most of the time because being self-employed, they work for NHS, or one of my sisters is a school teacher, so they don't have the same flexibility as I do. So my dad loved me driving him anyway. So I would drive over, pick up my mum and dad, and then drive, the 50 kilometres or so to Edinburgh to the hospital where he would get the radiotherapy. 40 minutes early. He wanted to be 40 minutes early. That was just part of the anxious way that the tumour affected him. He just needed to be early. Couldn't take any risks of not getting there. So we always got there at least 40 minutes early. Sometimes more than that. We just sit in the car or sit in the waiting room. And one time I was running a wee bit late one morning, and I was annoyed at myself for running late. And I was driving along the motorway faster than probably I should have been, and I was all wrapped up in my head, annoyed at myself for having running late. We weren't going to be late. We might only be 20 minutes early. We wouldn't be late. But I knew that my dad would be anxious. He'd be standing down at the car park wondering where I was, kind of thing. And so I was driving along the motorway, and I was dealing with that kind of thought and the fear of what's happening to my dad, dealing with a brain tumour. And I was so wrapped up in my own head that I was coming off the motorway. And I came off the motorway onto a wee mini roundabout, and I wasn't looking where I was going. And I drove right onto the roundabout. So very, very silly at the time. And another driver was there on the roundabout, and both of us just rammed our foots on the brakes. And we literally missed each other by a centimetre. And what I was expecting at that point was a mouthful of expletives and a horn. I was expecting the horn to be honked. And when you keep your hand on the horn for an extra few seconds to teach the person a lesson.
Yeah.
I was expecting that and a mouthful of swear words. But instead, he looked at me with a soft face and kind eyes, and he put his hand up and he said, "It's okay, on you go. It's okay, on you go." And I was totally shocked, and I went, thank you. And I drove on. I drove round the roundabout 100 yards along the road, and I burst into tears because I was so overcome with his kindness. It was so opposite to what I was expecting in that moment. And it really hit home that point, because he had no idea what I was dealing with at that point.
Exactly.
And I was so fragile at that point, despite the front I was showing to the world, my social media videos and all the other stuff I was doing and giving talks and stuff. I was really fragile inside, and no one knew what I was going through because my dad was a private man. He didn't want people to know. So I didn't tell anyone really. So no one knew what I was dealing with. And I don't think I could have coped with a horn a loud horn and a mouthful of swear words directed at me.
Exactly.
But he showed me kindness. And that was the first time I was conscious of being on the other side of that. You never know what people are dealing with. So the first thought I try to go to, and it's not always the answer, but it's the answer a lot of the time. If someone's being unkind, you never know what that person's dealing with. You know, a lot of people are working through a heavy chapter in the book of their life, and they just don't tell you because behind closed doors they're kind of suffering. So the first thing I do is that, and it's not always possible. Sometimes you need boundaries, as you pointed out at the start. Sometimes, depending on what it is, what the unkindness is, if someone's being unkind consistently, then sometimes we have to erect a boundary. And we've got to flip it round and say, okay, I now need to be kind to myself.
Yeah.
And being kind to myself requires a healthy boundary. And sometimes being kind to myself might mean leaving the room or leaving the situation if that's possible, or standing up for myself if that's necessary. So sometimes when I would say, if someone's not being kind to you, how you respond depends.
Yeah, I get
on the
that.
situation. You know, I was conscious when I wrote about this that a lot of people might want a single right answer to every context, but it always depends.
Yeah,
really
totally.
Depends.
And that brings me back to that lovely saying that, I think I first came across that saying in a Susan Jeffers book, you know, as in feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And she wrote that fantastic line, don't be right, be kind.
Yeah.
And, oh God, have I had to use that sometimes over the years? You know, if you're a bit of a control freak or a bit of a busybody, you know, and you kind of, you can, it's very easy, isn't it, to put someone down? Very easy to put someone down, very easy to tell them to do it a different way. Right. But how about don't be right, just be kind? You know, that changes so much.
It does.
It really does.
It immediately changes the dynamics of a situation, and then someone isn't going to get defensive.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just pick up, before we finish, just tell me a little bit more about being kind to ourselves, because of course, you know, with this community, the work that I do, it's such a massive piece of what we try to do is to recognize we have to be kind to ourselves. Self-care is not, you know, it's essential. It's not showing off. It's not, you know, being selfish. It's essential. So how do we give us one way we can start to be kind to ourselves if we're new to it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say I always talk about this, what I call a sweet spot. There's a sweet spot somewhere in between being kind to other people and being kind to yourself, recognizing your own needs and acting on those. And that's the first thing about self-kindness, is recognizing your own needs and acting upon those needs. And that sweet spot, where it is, changes from time to time in your life. Sometimes our cup is full. Yeah. And your energy cup is full, and you have plenty of time and energy, and even sometimes resources, if that's required, with which to help other people. But there's other times in our lives when our cup is almost empty, and the first thing you have to do is fill up your own cup. In other words, look after your own needs immediately, lest there's nothing left of you with which to give, to help other people. And so there's multiple ways we can do that. It doesn't always have to be expensive spa days. Nothing wrong with that at all. These are absolutely wonderful. But I think a lot of people think of self-kindness that, I have to go on an expensive spa day or treat myself to something expensive. Those are great things, but it's not the only thing you can do. You know, sometimes just, you know, a glass of wine or a hot bath. Well, I know you don't.
Well, not for us.
A glass of non-alcohol
an alcohol-free wine, yeah.
An alcohol-free wine, or a walk, you know, walk in the park, or a nice warm bath can be nice. One of the things I do, I get busy quite a lot of the time. So what I do, I recognise that when people need me, I'm quite happy to find a slot in my diary and to find a slot to help people out. But I realised one day that maybe self-kindness is about recognising my own needs. So maybe I should put a slot in my diary for me. So now what I do from time to time is I put in a bit in my diary that says meeting with self.
Yeah.
And actually write it as meeting with self.
Lovely.
And I award that time to myself. And I use that time for anything. Like recently I watched an episode of Star Trek, my time for myself. And I usually choose it during a working day because that's when I'm busy. So by making that symbolic act of meeting with self, it's for me, it could be half an hour. Like I did one this morning for half an hour, between 9 and 9:30. And I put meeting with self when I feel I need it.
Yeah.
And usually it's when I'm busiest. You know, the opposite of what you think. You know, if I'm really, really busy, I can't take time for myself. But that's when you need to take time for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Prioritize it. And the energy that you get from it makes you more efficient and more creative at doing what you do. So you actually get things done faster because you're more energized. Yeah.
Love it. Well, I could talk to you forever, David, but there's so much in your book. So tell us, where people can find more about you. I'm guessing the book can be pre-ordered. Yeah, what would you like to point us to?
Yeah, well, my website is drdavidhamilton.com, and that has everything on it. All my books. It has my blogs. I write a blog regularly, sometimes weekly. I have access, all my social media accounts are linked to my website. There's information about the new book. People that pre-order my book, the new one, I've created a kindfulness course, which is 5 free kindfulness meditations and a series of teachings as well. Just as a wee thank you for people that are pre-ordering.
Lovely.
And but all the information about me in the book is on my website.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest.
Thank you so much.
So I'll pop the link to the book in the show notes. And just a reminder then, if you are willing to vote for the podcast, for the Alcohol Free Life podcast, you just go to britishpodcastawards.com/voting, and that takes you to the listener choice page. Search for Alcohol Free Life and click your vote, and then you have to click the email that they send you. So appreciated. Thank you so much in advance. Check out my Substack, check out the Sober Club, obviously. If you're early days in this, then always reach out. I promise I will reply to as many messages as I possibly can. I'm easy to find on social media. Please follow me at Janey Lee Grace. And if you send me a private message, I'll do my best to reply to you. Whatever you do, just don't hold up. Maybe you don't want to join the Sober Club. Maybe you don't want to join any kind of community. That's okay. You do whatever works good for you, whatever works best for you. But do tell someone. It's really important to tell someone, especially someone who is going to hold the space for you and be your champion, someone who's going to, who's excited for you. That's really what we all need. So that person may not necessarily be your partner or your best friend, because they may not have been there, done it, got the t-shirt. So tell someone. You can very welcome to tell me, and I'll keep you inspired as best I possibly can. So stay connected. We're looking forward to seeing some of you on July the 2nd. Looking forward to anyone who is able to get along to that event. I know that it's only a small event, so tickets do sell out, but we'll put another one on at some point as well. I haven't forgotten about putting another Constellations in place. We're thinking of doing something in September in York, and probably one in Hertfordshire before that. So drop me a message if that's of interest. And then just a mention for my book that comes out in October, when I'm going to be doing a bunch of gigs around the UK. So anyone who knows funky, fabulous bookshops, particularly if they've got a cafe and they might want me to do some kind of little talk or something, then drop me a message, and then I can get to be in your town and stop being so kind of southern, get myself out of Hertfordshire. That would be cool. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by the Sober Club. Please rate and review. And if you want support, accountability and inspiration, and you want to live your best life without the booze, check out thesoberclub.com.